Hello, everybody. Welcome to ICC's Game of the Day. I'm Grandmaster Joel Benjamin, and today I have for you action from round 4 of the Zurich Chess Challenge, a tournament with 6 of the top players in the world. And in this round today, in the 3 games, 2 of them were drawn. Aronian against Karana. Aronian did not play with the confidence that he had in the past and missed a couple of opportunities. That game ended in a draw. Kramnik Karyakin was an unusual opening. Definitely not theory, but eventually that balanced out as well. The one decisive game with a big impact on the standings was Vishy Anand beating Hikaru Nakamura. Now, of course, Hikaru been off to a great start in this tournament, 2.5 out of 3, and his last win put him over the magical 2,800 mark for the first time in his career, and quite a nice accomplishment, but unfortunately didn't get to enjoy it for very long, as he's been knocked back under on the live rating list by Anand, who employed an opening that he had certainly researched for his World Championship match with Magnus Carlsen, a variation of the Queen's Gambit declined with Bishop F4, one that he put into play in that match. In fact, Knight BD7 when played by Carlsen, this was the one game where that Anand was able to win, as he completely outprepared Carlsen, and the way that Carlsen handled the opening was very risky and dubious. In fact, later in the match, Carlsen did not go back to Knight BD7 and instead played C5, which is the older move, an entirely different variation. But Knight BD7 is the most common move today. And after C5, Nakamura played Knight H5 to grab this bishop right away. And by getting rid of that bishop, that means that this pressure on the H2 B8 diagonal will be gone. Black will not have to worry about being able to put a rook on B8 later if that file should become open. So on the surface, it looks great, but it doesn't automatically solve Black's problems, because White plays Bishop D3, not Bishop G3, looking to open the H file, because White won't really be able to attack on the H file. But actually, this exchange on F4, it's benefiting White to have that pawn to come to F4, because now he's really clamping down the center. There's really no chance for Black playing E5, and later on the knight might jump into E5. In fact, we did see that in the game. So White is increasing his space. So Black sets about attacking this queenside pawn chain. Queen C7, hitting the pawn in F4, and also making sure that certain tactics involving B5 and maybe subsequent C6 won't happen. This is a position that has occurred many times in Grandmaster practice. Rook E1 is slightly less common than the immediate exchange on A6, although it comes out to pretty much the same type of position. Bishop F6. This gets out of the way of a possible threat of F5, although Black could also just take on D3, and F5 I think wouldn't really be threatened, because Black would have the idea of trading the pawns on B4 and trading the rooks and getting the rook off of the E file so that he would be able to capture on F5. But Nakamura decides to get this bishop off of that line of the rook, and also putting some pressure on C5, creating a possibility that Black might capture on C5. Now, this is a interesting moment, because looking over the games, I saw that Nakamura once upon a time had this position with White against Peter Heine Nielsen, and he played here Bishop C2, avoiding the trade of Black's bad bishop, and he subsequently was able to win that game against Nielsen. But it's not necessarily clear that White gets an advantage in doing that, because Black can stick this bishop to c4, and if need be, support that with b5. So the bishop is a little bit in the way there, and black is going to play g6 to blunt the bishop's diagonal anyway. So Anand played a little bit of a cagey move, king g2. You might think, well, maybe h4 would be slightly more to the point, or if white wanted to stabilize, he could just waste a tempo with queen e2 to get this exchange. But Anand actually tries to tempt black into grabbing this pawn on c5 with the tactic that this c3 is hanging. But white can go take on h7. If black takes queen c2 check, or even knight g5, can throw on knight g5 to threaten the mate, and then recapturing, white would have definitely a positional advantage. After bishop h7, black could play king h8, but then knight h4. Interestingly enough, I put this on the computer, and it said at first that black is doing well, but then going a few moves deeper, it pointed out this move bishop f5 is very strong for white, with all kinds of sacrifices happening on the e-file. And interestingly, when we were doing the broadcast today, Maxime Delugi came up with this variation for white very quickly on the spot. I was very impressed, thinking like a computer, but without a computer in his shoe or anything like that. So nice job of live analysis there, and the computer confirms it. So that was a little bit of a trick, and because the knight going to h4 seems to be useful, that's why king g2 and not h4. Anand, having worked on this opening variation for his world championship match, seems to know a lot of minute details about it. So black finally goes ahead and makes this exchange. Rook fb8, h4, and now black has to figure out where he wants to go with this. I don't know that b5 necessarily helps, blocks up the position, but white still can play to open up the queen side with a4. And black would not want to close up that side of the board too completely, even though he would have certainly avoid losing over there. But white is such a space advantage. He's going to attack the king side, no counterplay whatsoever. He could just throw everything over there. So the challenge is that black has to get some counterplay on the queen side or trade pieces effectively, but in the process he might end up losing on that side of the board. That's why it's a real challenge. So queen a7, and now very interesting moment. Anand plays knight e2, basically ignoring this threat of a takes b4 and gaining two rooks for a queen. Generally we think of two rooks being stronger than the queen, but it's a very dynamic thing. And in this position, white has a couple of possibilities, f5 and b5. b5 is the move most favored by the computer, with the idea that white is going to get a passed pawn to c6. On either one of these captures, computer actually proposes rook c8 here, which I don't know if is such an obvious move, and says that white is somewhat better, but not winning or anything. It was not an easy decision at all for Nakamura to make over the board, and he decided to wait on that capture, play g6, a useful move to prevent f5 and also to make luft, so no more back rank mates. But now Anand decided, okay, let me take that away from you. I suppose he probably could have played this move earlier, but he first offered that opportunity to exchange on b4 and a1, and also maybe he's now possibly even toying with the idea in some variations of capturing with the d pawn on c5. The knight can go to e2. So Nakamura decided, let's clean this up here and play queen a2. Possibly he was a little concerned that if he took on c5, white might take with the d pawn. As I said, put the knight on d4. This queen a2, as it turns out, becomes kind of a false activity. The queen did not accomplish much there, but Nakamura certainly could have followed up this position better. After rook ec1, probably starting to threaten b5, so Nakamura takes. And now h5 comes because black is rightfully concerned about white playing h5. In some variations that Delugi and I were running together, white could follow up with g4 and either g5 or f5, often in conjunction with h6, creating back rank problems and a possible uh, potential mate on g7. So h5 really does stabilize things over there, but now the knight jumps into e5 with a bit of a dilemma for black. You kind of have to take that knight because the c6 pawn, the queen isn't in a position to defend the c6 pawn anymore. But how do you do it? If you take with the bishop, white, imagine, takes with the f pawn, undoubling. The knight on d7 is just so poor. It just has no squares to go to. It's a liability. It could be potentially attacked. The white knight on e2 has potential to go everywhere. So the better choice is to take with the knight. But now, a very strange decision by Nakamura. He does not play bishop d8, and after bishop d8, he might not be that poorly off. He guards that b6 square, prevents any penetration on the on the queen side, and after this move, bishop d8, white would perhaps play queen d1, maybe some ideas of rook a1. Computer says rook takes b1 and queen c4. That seems reasonable. And I don't know if black is much worse in this position or not. He does have some potential counterplay. White's ideas on the king side, maybe even black can do something about, because the bishop is looking at this h4 pawn in case white plays g4. There are some possibilities there. So all around, bishop d8 just seemed like a much better defense. A surprising decision, because that's one that pretty much everybody seeing this live felt there was a big mistake. The rook came into b6, and now I think that black is close to lost in this position. It makes that much difference. Taking the rook, not really a great option because the pawn b6 too strong. But after rook c8, now white is dominating the b file, and that c6 pawn is much, much more vulnerable. So from here, obviously, white is going to take the b file. But in our analysis, we were thinking about maybe the knight would to come around to the king side, and white would look to break there with g4. Certainly, there's a lot of potential for an attack over there. But Anand, well, first stabilized the queen side, said, okay, let's see where the queen is going. The queen went back with knight and c3, probably not anything to accomplish outside. So he pushed the queen back, and now played a maneuver that I have to say, at first I didn't think there was really much to it. He brought the knight to a4. Again, I was thinking in terms of bringing the knight the other way to the king side for that attack. But he found a way to really make this knight coming to b6 very useful. And again, Nakamura didn't defend in the best way. Queen d8, probably okay. And rook a6. This is really the key to white's idea, is he's not going to get a position where the knight blocks the b file and allows black to have the a file. The knight is going to come in, he's not going to give the a file, and the knight b6 clogging things up, and then white maybe even can go over to kingside attack. But after rook a6, Nakamura could have defended better, for instance, with a move like rook c7. We could see knight b6, trade, queen a6. So black didn't get the a file. White has a lot of options in this kind of position. He can try to go directly, force something on the queen side, or he can eventually backtrack with the rook and or queen to the other side of the board and try to force through g4. It's a very unpleasant position for black. The computer rates this as not an overwhelming advantage for white, but practically speaking, it looks like white is on the verge of winning eventually, and black very, very hard to play. So Nakamura instead went for a continuation, which was undeniably desperate. King g7 after rook b7. Well, now the queen side is actually falling apart. So he goes for this counterplay with g5. But there are many ways to refute it, and in our analysis, we were focusing mainly on Queen A7, very strong move. If Black goes for Rook A8 to try to duke it out tactically, Rook F7 check, King back to G8. Otherwise, Rook F6 is going to be strong, and then White can simply move the Queen. And if Rook takes A4, Rook F6 is the strongest, hitting the Bishop. White Queen ready to come to F7. Basically, all of Black's pawn chain is ready to disappear, and White may be able to force a mate or win as a Queen in a few moves. So after Queen A7 in this variation, Black could go and defend the F pawn, but then something like Knight B6 coming into D7 and F6 would wrap things up. But Anand played a move that nobody watching was really expecting, but was quite fine, no problem with it. Queen E2, hitting the pawn on H5. Black takes on H4, Queen H5 is hitting the pawn on F7, and the same business is happening on the other side. White is getting ready to play Knight B6 and Knight D7, and maybe we'll just take off the H4 pawn for free as well. So Queen E2 provoked G4, protecting over there, but now there's no counterplay for Black, and the Queen just came back to A6. And White is getting ready to play Knight B6, and basically the pawn on C6 is going to drop. White has many ways to go about it. In some variations, he can even maneuver the knight to D6. One way or another, that pawn is going to go. The bishop, the Black bishop, really is in no position to defend it. But okay, Nakamura went for desperation. Knight B6, Rook F8. If the Rook went to a different square, there would still be Knight D7 idea, or let's say the Rook went to D8. White could tie it down with Queen A7 or bring the Queen back to D3, but just preventing Queen H7. And then White has ideas like Knight D7, but also simply Rook C7 and taking off the pawn on C6. Black is just pretty much helpless, whatever he does. So Nakamura went full-on desperation mode with Rook F8, Knight D7, Queen H7. But there's nothing there with that check on E4. He just takes the Rook. And he's got a threat of Knight E6 check, and any Queen move would allow that. So Nakamura takes the Knight. But now, just the counterattack decides the game. Black has no chance to even threaten a check on the king. Queen G8 mate is coming. And after King G6, Queen H8 threatens mate in 2, Queen F6, Rook H8. Also, a check on G8 could be killing. For instance, Queen F5 would run into Rook G8 mating. And finally, Bishop G7, Rook G8 is a killer. There's no way to defend the bishop on G7. So after Queen H8, basically mate is forced, and Nakamura resigned. So resounding victory for Vishy Anand. Good opening preparation. As usual, he's strong in the opening, and when he gets the right position, he's very, very dangerous. Nakamura, perhaps not the best opening choice. He's trying to be principled in his opening choices, but certainly Vishy knows his way around this one after that World Championship match. And big victory, changing the standings, bringing Anand ahead into first place, ahead of Nakamura, with the rest of the field trailing behind. So one more round of classical chess in this event. We'll see if Nakamura can rebound from this and win the tournament and hopefully get his rating back over 2,800. So, all right, that about does it for round 4 from Zurich Chess Challenge. I'm Grandmaster Joel Benjamin. I hope you enjoyed that analysis. I hope you enjoyed ICC's Game of the Day.